They seized a staggering 200 acres of my land, as if it were theirs to take. There was no court order or warning. Just gone. When I called the HOA president, he had the audacity to laugh. When I called him to ask why this was happening, he said I should read the fine print, but I did read the fine print. That's when I realized the HOA had committed a crime, a felony. So I stopped fighting fair. I examined the bylaws, zoning codes, property deeds, everything they thought empowered them. And I retaliated in a way no one expected. Within 48 hours, 3 of their so-called prized lakefront mansions were sold legally, right under their noses. You might be wondering, how did I turn the tables so dramatically? What could possibly push someone to this extent? And more crucially, what happens when an HOA realizes they're not the law, but someone finally is? What happens when they're the ones being held accountable? The kind of peacefulness that you experience deep down when you wake up to birds chirping instead of sirens blaring, when your dog is free to wander in a fenced yard, and when your children are able to ride bicycles down tree-lined streets that are free of traffic. I bought a modest 2-story house at the edge of the development that was bordering on a wooded area that was family land and untouched land that I had grown up on. I didn't flaunt it. I never built a fence, never blocked views. I just lived. Willow Ridge was supposed to be that rare place where rules made sense. No junk cars, no commercial signage, things like that. The HOA that protected property values and did not stifle lives. It felt that way at the start. Welcome packets, block parties, holiday light contests, the works. The president, Diane Holloway, even brought me a casserole when my dad passed. But now I realized that Diane was not just a neighbor. She was a city planner with a clipboard and a smile that did not reach her eyes. Loveless bylaws, the way some people would obsessively and proudly over crossword puzzles. Over time, the emails and meetings grew colder. The cadence of calendar invites expanded to span the weeks. My compost bin, which was too visible from the street, needed formal justification. That's where I stopped entirely caring. The best part was the unapologetic diatribe and then the notice. Land use in question would be land use without additional permits. Cease and desist. I sat in disbelief. Farming? Construction? I hadn't done anything beyond clearing a trail. But the HOA thought differently for the 200 acres I'd owned since birth and was deeded, taxed, and surveyed claimed jurisdiction under some loosely defined shared watershed easement, an amendment from 1987. I thought it was funny, at least at the start. That is, until I called a lawyer. It was then I found out it's not only a land right dispute. I began receiving fines, the first of which was $500 for unapproved vegetation management on what I thought was my land. I'll admit I laughed. I really did. The damage was a narrow footpath I'd cleared a long time ago and was as natural as a walk in the woods. No heavy machinery, no harm, just a bit of a walk. I called HOA expecting some sense. But no, the violation stands, was the response. Pay or appeal. That was the appeal response. I hadn't expected my neighborhood was a box until I stood on a folding chair under fluorescent lights. But there I was, with fellow residents I used to greet at the mailbox. I even brought documents, from satellite images, property deeds, tax records, proving the land was in my family for generations, long before there even was a Willow Ridge. Diane Holloway sat at the table's head with her arms crossed and not even glancing at the papers the other people at the table had brought with them. "Mr. Carter," she said, "your sentimentality is noted, but the covenant is clear. All undeveloped land within the watershed buffer zone is subject to HOA oversight for environmental compliance." I had never heard of the watershed buffer zone. I was sure I never came across that in any of the disclosures. That night I remember to myself, I had scrolled through every page of the 83-page bylaws. In section 7.3, 4, Shared Easements and Environmental Stewardship, which is titled a clause so vague, so broadly worded, could swallow closure an entire county. It claimed jurisdiction over any land that drains toward or impacts the community's central lake. Under that reasoning, half the county was theirs. I was not their biggest problem yet. They hit me with another fine. $200 for unauthorized tree removal. I had removed a solitary dead oak tree that had fallen across a trail after a storm. I didn't see any permits to clear that oak tree, and there was no sign of a crew to notice. A chainsaw and dumb common sense was being my best friend. While I was grappling with the fine, I was hit with a letter stating I was in material default due to unpaid assessments. So there came my bank to settle the score on me, which started with my credit. That's when things started to feel a little more aggressive. A drone buzzed over my property every morning at 7:15 my time. I could see it, a black object, silent, circling like a vulture. It seemed like they were documenting violations in real time. One day I discovered a notice stuck to my front door reading, "Excessive noise from generator use during non-emergency hours." As a matter of fact, I didn't own a generator. Rumors were on the rise. I could hear it at the community pool. He's squatting on HOA land. He's planning to build a junkyard. He's got illegal structures out there. I do remember there was a petition to reclaim environmentally sensitive areas for community benefit. And then the auction notice. This was the HOA website where it was posted. Parcel W7, approx. 200 acres, to be sold at public auction to fund lake restoration and greenbelt expansion. But in the minutes of a closed executive session, I was fined, but I was being erased. I called the HOA's lawyer, and to my surprise, he was smirking. "You had your chance to comply. The board has the authority. The sale is legal." Legal? I thought. I took every document to my cousin, a real estate attorney in Austin. They can't do this. That clause? It's been invalidated in 2 prior court cases, and they didn't follow proper notice procedures. This isn't just overreach, it's constructive fraud, he told me. I was shaking my hands. It's clear that issues concerning sports and entire systems of society belong to the category of power and subjugation. From the very statement above, we can conclude that some people think sports to be some kind of a game. When faced with less psychological and moral problems, I started to follow and rehearse on the methods of social catering. I collected all the cardinal documents. Each of them carried a great importance. I organized the tax address, tax documents. But most of all, I was excited about the documents I obtained from the institutions and the fact that I could get from the supervision agency. The land was registered as apartments with a commercial cover, constituented and subtenanted land that was, judging by the realization, void of any capital gains tax, or could be, void of any gains tax. Constituented or subdivided land. That land had previously had a 612 bylaws or boundaries which would previously have been put void of any prison. No tax prison. It was a misconception that too much space had been acquired for a nature park. In fact, they had put themselves in the frame of value. It was strange to realize how good it felt to notice that the number of problems was on the decrease. Their zero-tolerance policies allowed me to dispute on behalf of the capital gain or total combination of the entire realm. The new castle in the capital was started and owned by the supervision affairs. I wrote the name documents with the main middle position in the file supplied. Against the HOA president. For illegal occupancy. As I hit submit, I was sure of one thing. This wasn't over. Rather, it was just getting started. My county hearing was on Tuesday. This time at the Municipal Justice Center, room 3B at 9 a.m. I decided to wear a full suit. I walked in alone, without a lawyer, because I refused to be labeled as the problem resident or uncooperative landowner. I wanted them to see me as a resident that did his homework and did not come begging for mercy. That morning, I was armed with a folder full of receipts, maps, and other documents that proved my claims. Of course, the opposing side was led by Diane Holloway, and was on time with the HOA lawyer. I say this because they showed up 10 minutes late. To me, they looked like they didn't care, and this was just business as usual. The judge was just as uninterested and was ready to begin. In the matter of property compliance, Willow Ridge OA versus James Carter. I then stood. This was the moment for me, and the most impactful day of my life up to that point. I had frankly always wanted to shout it out loud. Your Honor, I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to report a fraud. Silence. Even the bailiff stopped for a moment. I opened my folder and displayed the first document. A certified plat map, dated 1989, depicting the original zoning of parcel L1, L2, and L3 as commercial retail, Zone C2. Following that, I pulled out the current permits for construction. They were denied. Following that, the occupancy certificates were also never issued. Following that, I brought photos of the property. Diane Holloway's $3.2 million lakefront mansion. The property featured a private dock, a guest house, and an infinity pool. These constructions were placed on land that, by law, should have never allowed any residential construction. I,